Gerald is on the board of IWOSC for many years. He is a wonderful asset to IWOSC. He will be reading Preacher Stalls the Second Coming, and this is his 14th novel. Take it away, Gerald.
Thank you, Ruth. Reverend Wycliff, much of what you believe in your Christian faith is true, but not for the reasons you believe. The grizzled old man at my door was muttering in heavily accented English, but his message was unmistakable. It didn't help my perception that I was severely hungover, having spent most of the night alternately guzzling cheap bourbon and praying. It was a spring morning, only slightly chilly, promising a day that might be perfectly fine. I was clad in my habitual sweatsuit, which might well have reeked by now, but I'd grown so accustomed to my own stink I wouldn't know. I worried he did, even though his outward appearance was no more respectable than mine. He was dressed in a black business suit, but it wasn't his size. It looked rumpled and dirty, as if he'd been sleeping in doorways. I finally managed to drop off to sleep just moments before there came the polite knock on my door, and I was having trouble keeping my eyes open. "You made coffee?" he asked with an approving sniff. It wasn't so much a question as an insistent hint. When I'd prepared with undue optimism last night to crawl into bed, I'd set this automatic drip machine for precisely this hour. It seems I have no choice but to invite him in. I still hadn't greeted him or said a word yet. I simply opened the door to my humble cube-sized trailer home and waved an arm toward its shabby interior. On the narrow counter where I undertake food preparations, often no more complex than opening a can, I could only find one mug, and that one encrusted with my own leavings. As he jostled behind me and sat in the only chair, I rummaged in the wall-mounted crate that houses dinnerware, condiments, and pharmaceuticals. I was delighted to find a second cup, this one emblazoned with the logo of the Twin Dragons Casino. I couldn't remember the last time I'd needed to use it, but it looked reasonably clean. I filled both cups from the steaming carafe, turned to offer him his, and before I could finally manage to speak to ask his preferences, he blurted what sounded like, "Keine Creme, keine Zucker, trying to quit Zucker." German, I realized, or perhaps his accent was some other Eastern European extraction, and he was telling me he'd be more comfortable if I shared his other common language. I sat down on my cot and blew out a puff of exhaustion, doubly fatigued after my long, dark night of the soul and the presumably unpleasant surprise of this intrusion on my unenviable privacy. We both sipped reverently, it seemed. He smacked his lips before he sighed and said, "I took a long time finding you. Fortunately, your neighbors are shameless gossips." I took another restorative sip, cleared my throat, and asked gruffly, "To what do I owe the pleasure, Mr. Dr. Gropius, Hans Gropius? Forgive the similarity in name to the famous historical person, but no relation. The surname not of my choice, of course, but people assume I must be from family of architects." He sipped again, this time long and noisily, then added with a chuckle, "Although I stand in awe of the grand design." Somehow I caught the hint. My brain was waking up. There had to be a reason this fellow had taken pains to seek me out. So I asked, "Design? Physical or spiritual?" He chuckled again. "Insight you have. I knew I was in the right place. Simply toss out phrase that suggests scheme of creation. You jump on it. Clever fellow. We are going to be friends. I am sure of it." I cautioned him by displaying the upraised palms of my hands. It occurred to me he might think I was intending to show him stigmata or perhaps Parkinson's tremor, neither of which I think I have, and might seem crazy, but based on his behavior so far, I had no reason to expect he was sane either. When you talk about what I believe, I don't know how you'd know. I will say I'm not an agnostic, although certainly I have been accused of such. I insist I'm a man of faith, but faith in what mostly defies definition, depends on the day and my mood. He smiled, complaining. "I was a faithful listener of your broadcasts. I was saddened when you went off the air. Then news of your resignation from your ministry, so upsetting." I did resign, but I was kicked out, but the result's the same. I suppose my tumble downhill began when my wife left me. Turns out being a minister's wife is an even heavier cross to bear than being a pastor. As for my show, I tried to speak truth to power one too many times. Do you believe in afterlife? He asked quietly. At that moment, I wished the coffee were bourbon and I could stiffen myself with a shot. I began to worry he might be a journalist or some emissary from church leadership sent to chastise me. But I decided I might as well answer honestly as I could. I don't believe in resurrection of the body as a living, breathing human body, but reincarnation, transfer of consciousness from one being or state of being to another. I won't say it's impossible. I worry it's not, but because I have an obsessively curious intellect, I worry a lot. My dear Evan, he began, then stopped himself to ask, may I address you so? I feel I know you so well, you see. His manner was amusing, endearing. Go ahead, I allowed. Please tell me more about myself than I know, and I'll gift you another cup of coffee. He loved this. Grinning broadly, he teased, you are, of course, aware of virtual reality? Sure, I said, but I can't say I've indulged. Not games for kids anymore, I understand. Frankly, it's scary. And you know work of physicist Nick Bostrom? I do, I admitted. Not in depth, but I believe he's famous for speculating we don't live in what's termed base reality. Just so, the visitor said approvingly. So, I echoed. Evan, I don't know about your neighbors, or indeed anyone else living on planet now, but I believe you and I are tourists from the future.